Hey squad, welcome back. Now today we're continuing our exploration of ways in which you can create better mixes. Now if you haven't watched any of my other videos in this series, make sure you do. Check the links in the description as well as the cards above. So today's video is all about microphones. Now you might be wondering, what has microphones got to do with making better mixes? Well, if you're recording vocals or other acoustic instruments, then microphones have everything to do with your mixes. Because if you're not using the right types of mics, and if you haven't got them set up properly, that's going to have a detrimental impact on your overall mix. I'm sure you heard the saying, garbage in, garbage out. Now here's a perfect example of where that saying is true. Anyway, if you feel I bring you value in these videos, remember to like, subscribe and leave me a comment. And if you feel my videos are worthwhile, why not hit me up with a super thanks? That will go a long way in supporting the channel to continue to bring you great content. Well, it's that time, so let's get into it. Okay, so right now you might be thinking, what on earth has your choice of microphone got to do with your mixes? Well, like I said before, it's got everything to do with your mixes, and that's what we're going to explore today. Now, straight off the bat, let me clarify, this video is not a microphone review video, but you can check out a couple of my earlier videos where I do talk about mic selection, specifically in relation to recording vocals. Now, your choice of microphone is going to be dependent on 4 key factors, in my opinion. The first thing is, of course, the instrument or the sound source that you are planning to record. Whether you're recording vocals, maybe you're recording drums, how about violins or guitars or horns or simply acoustic effects? Now, the second influencing factor is your recording environment. Are you going to be recording in a well-insulated, acoustically treated room or space, or is it going to be in a domestic space, or maybe even in a space where there's going to be background noise? That too will determine the type of mic you're going to be choosing. Another key element is the stylistic requirements. Maybe you're planning to record some vocals and you want to get the tonal characteristics of a particular artist. Maybe you're going for that smooth Nat King Cole sound, or the very dynamic Adele sound, or maybe you're doing rap vocals with a very powerful rap artist. Once again, your choice of microphone will be impacted and influenced by this particular factor. And finally, your budget. How much can you afford? And do you need to spend thousands of dollars on a microphone simply because you've seen it in someone else's studio and you think, I must have that in order to achieve the sound I'm looking for? In fact, there are hundreds of microphone manufacturers, which means there are thousands of different microphone models, and you need to be able to choose the right one that suits your circumstances. Essentially, there are 3 types of studio recording mics that you might want to consider when you're setting up for your recording. And these are your dynamic microphones, ribbon mics, and condensers. Let's start with dynamic microphones. Typically, you'd see dynamic microphones used in live settings, where live performances are taking place on stage in an open environment, and probably the most famous, iconic dynamic microphone that you're going to see is the Shure SM58 vocal microphone. But in a studio environment, dynamic microphones are also very much used, in particular on drums and percussion, where very high sound pressure levels are being sent to the microphone and the mics themselves are placed very close to the sound source, as you can see here on the snare drum. Now, dynamic microphones are great for picking up sounds that are directly in front of the microphone and thereby rejecting sounds that are further away. They are definitely not as sensitive as the other 2 types of microphones, but are great for hard-hitting sounds, as well as situations where the mic can be placed right up close to the source of the sound. As for vocal recording, you can definitely use a dynamic microphone for capturing vocals in a studio environment, but you're less likely to do so because a condenser microphone will be far more flattering to vocals and capture a lot more detail from the artist's voice. So in a studio environment, the main microphones used are very likely to be condenser microphones, especially on vocals. Now, unlike dynamic microphones, which generally pick up sounds that are fairly close to the actual mic, condensers are far more sensitive and can pick up even the quietest noise in the far corner of the room. They are far more flexible than dynamic microphones in that they come with a number of different switches, which we'll get into later on, and they are a lot more expensive compared to dynamic microphones. In fact, you can spend several $1,000s on a single large diaphragm condenser microphone. Now, besides recording vocals in a studio environment where a condenser is going to be the most obvious choice, these types of microphones can also be very effective in recording other instruments such as guitars and strings, and they're very useful as drum overheads. They're also great for capturing ensembles, whether it be a string quartet or a vocal ensemble, when used in a multi-mic setup such as a stereo pairing or mid-side configuration. Now, all condensers are not the same, and the quality and tonal character that the condenser mic captures is important, especially when you're dealing with vocals. So if you're a singer or a rapper, it's definitely worthwhile trying out different types of microphones which will suit your tone and expression and represent that best in a recording. Now, the third type of microphone that I've mentioned is the ribbon mic, and ribbon mics aren't used as often as the other two types of mics, but they themselves have their own very unique characteristics. So if you want to capture the sound of guitars or acoustic guitars and maintain a more warm, more dark encompassing tonal reference, then ribbon mics would be a really good option for you. Again, they are quite expensive, and because of their build, they are pretty fragile as well, so you don't want to go dropping them around because that's going to cost you quite dearly. However, in your small and mid-sized studios, you're more likely to find condensers and dynamics as part of the arsenal, and less so the ribbon microphone. However, this is definitely an option to consider if you're building up a collection where you're recording a range of different types of instruments and sounds, and you want to vary the tonal quality of the recordings. So, as I've mentioned in previous videos, I run a lot of music production workshops in some of the UK's most high-profile prisons. 99% of the time I'm recording rap vocals, and once in a while I'm recording some singing. Now, some of the prisons are pretty well stocked with condensers and dynamic microphones, but often the environment in which we're working is not ideal. So I might be in a classroom with maybe 8 guys, 2 of whom are involved in the track that's being recorded, and the rest are just getting on with other stuff. The guys who aren't necessarily involved in the project might be talking quietly amongst themselves, and of course the room is not acoustically treated. We're contending with hard, untreated walls, high ceilings, and working from headphones. In circumstances like this, I typically will set up a dynamic microphone with a reflection filter and a pop shield. Using this approach, we're able to reject much of the background noise when recording and pretty much capturing whatever's going directly into the microphone. In the mix, I'll be able to roll off even more of the low frequency content and brighten things up a bit to improve the clarity of the voice and allow for the vocal to sit well within the mix. At times, I need to use a noise gate to add further noise management to the actual vocal tracks, but I found this method to be very successful as opposed to using a condenser mic in that environment and having to deal with all of the issues that will arise as a result. Now, a good quality condenser microphone will come with 3 main switches. The first one is your polar pattern switch, the second is the bass roll-off switch, and the third is the pad switch. Now, the use of these switches is very important and can have a real impact on your mix. Let's start off with the bass roll-off switch. I've always got this switch engaged on vocals, and what it does, it rolls off or filters audio content below a specific frequency, and in the majority of cases that's usually around between 80 Hz and 100 Hz, and when you see this symbol right here, this represents bass roll-off. I've covered this in other videos which you might want to check out, but a decent condenser microphone will have a bass roll-off switch available to you. I always engage this switch on vocals because the most important frequencies we need to capture from the human voice exist above 100 Hz. So if we have this bass roll-off switch engaged, we are filtering and getting rid of anything below 100 Hz or 80 Hz, whichever setting relates to your particular microphone. Anything below that frequency is likely to be background noise or room acoustics. We'll be filtering that content out right at the outset. And that means your DAW will be receiving a far cleaner signal, which will allow you a bit more headroom and definitely a cleaner tone when it comes to editing and mixing that vocal. Now for the pad switch. This also is an important thing you need to pay attention to. Although large diaphragm condenser microphones are able to handle pretty high sound pressure levels, you might be in a situation where you have a vocalist who's standing pretty close to the mic and is really belting out a song, either as a singer or a rapper, and you do want that sort of close proximity to the mic to capture the energy. You might well find that your mic starts clipping because sometimes the attack energy of that vocalist might be a bit too much and will overload the mic. By engaging the pad switch, what you're effectively doing is reducing the gain on the microphone, and therefore the vocalist is free to go for the maximum expression in that close proximity setting without worrying about overloading the mic or clipping the signal. This is really important. It's something you really want to pay attention to depending on the circumstances. And finally, we've got our polar pattern switch. Once again, the way you've got your polar pattern switching set up is going to impact the quality of your mix. Let's focus on vocals. If you're recording a vocalist who's standing directly in front of the microphone, you want to narrow the pattern, thereby switching to the appropriate polar pattern. However, if you want to capture a vocal trio all at the same time using a single microphone, then you'd want to widen the range and therefore have a wider pattern. So understanding what the polar pattern switches do is definitely something you want to make sure you have knowledge of and used appropriately, because if you haven't got the mic set up properly for the sound or instrument that you're trying to capture, you're going to introduce unnecessary mud and unnecessary background noise and interference into your signal, which is going to cause you a bit of a headache later on when it comes to mixing that take. So to wrap things up, how is all of this information going to help you in terms of your mix? Well, firstly, by applying these techniques, you're going to get the cleanest, most direct sound from the sound source that you're trying to capture. You're also going to be reducing background noise and interference, which of course is going to help the mix. You're also going to be reducing the chances of your signal clipping or distorting, and that too is going to help you when it comes to mixing. In terms of choosing the right type of microphone for the right vocalist, you're going to capture the tonal qualities and characteristics that represent that vocalist or that guitar sound that you're looking for. And of course, as I mentioned previously, if you're trying to replicate the sound of a famous artist or singer, then by using a similar type of microphone in a similar setup to that person, you may well be able to capture that signature tone on your own vocals. And by doing all of these things, it means less unnecessary processing and shaping of the recordings later on, which of course will give you a much cleaner and true representation of your recorded material. So once again, I hope this video has brought you value. If it has done, remember to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment. I'm always looking forward to hearing from you guys. And of course, don't forget that super thanks button. You can always hit it if you believe that the content I'm bringing you is worthwhile. Anyway, I'll be back soon. I'm Deuce. I'm out. Peace.